to do. So, my presentation today is about well-being and the role of plant medicines in healing, which we all know in this particular audience that plants have so much to give in terms of healing. And this is what we're going to be looking at as I go through my presentation for the next 30 minutes. A few words about myself. I am the founder of Green Key Personal Development and Green Key Health. In Green Key Health, I'm a practicing medical herbalist, kinesiologist, and naturopath, and I'm also a Reiki practitioner. I obviously work with individuals on health issues, mostly chronic and very complex issues that have been going on for some years, but we all know how dis-ease, to use the words of Dr. Chola yesterday, arrives or manifests in the body. I also work with organizations on bringing organizational well-being into the company culture, because I'm a big believer that leaders have an enormous role to play in the wellness of their teams. And at the moment, what I see in organizations is it's mostly about a sticking plaster approach where they'll say, yes, well, we have a menopause policy, we have a mental health policy, we have mental health first aiders, etc. But this is not dealing with the cause. And it's exactly the same when we work with health and well-being. We have to go back to the cause in order to change the future. And that's what I do also in organizations through the leadership line. So the Green Key philosophy is very much about empowering people to heal, to rebalance, and to thrive, mind, body, and soul. I look at well-being, and I think we all look at well-being in this audience as holistic. You cannot only look at the manifestation of a particular dis-ease in the body and ignore the rest. If the mind isn't right, the body's not right. If the body's not right, the mind's not right. And certainly, if somebody is not on their soul path, in other words, the purpose of why they came onto this planet, it's going to manifest in some form of disbalance in the body and or mind. So what are we going to look at today? So the key points that I'm going to touch on are the definition of pharmacology and what this means and what I understand it means, how plant medicine works in a very simplistic way, the relationship of plant medicine to the body and that healing process, basic actions of plants. And again, Dr. Chola touched on this yesterday. I'm obviously not going to do a lot of detail because 30 minutes does not allow for this. And finally, to look at the difference between plant medicine and pharmaceuticals and how they differ in the way that they work in the body. Okay, so I'd like to start with this quote, which came from the basic medical key principles of herbal pharmacology. The body is not a one-note melody, but a symphony of many interactive components functioning synergistically. The active ingredient model does not stem from a strength of the scientific method, as often supposed. Rather, it stems from a weakness, from the inability of the reductionist method to deal with complex systems. So to put that in very simple terms, the body is complex and it works as a symphony. And therefore, we cannot reduce the body and mind. When I talk about body, I'm also encompassing the mind, the whole. We cannot reduce it to the respiratory system and only treat the lungs, or the lymphatic system and only treat the lymphatics. or the gut and only treat the gut without having some kind of impact on the rest of this complex mechanism or complex systems that make up the human and all living creatures, actually. So, with that in mind, when we talk about pharmacology, pharmacology is defined as the study of the interactivity of biologically active agents within living systems. It includes both pharmacodynamics, in other words, how it acts on the body when you put something into the body or topically on the skin, and pharmacokinetics, how the body acts on it. And again, very often when we look at the pharmaceutical approach, it's looking one way. It's looking at, well, this particular drug will act in this way on your body. But it's not looking at the other way, how the body acts on it very often. And plants take in both pictures of the pharmacodynamics and the pharmacokinetics. And how is that, or why is that? Because each plant has a particular vibration and or frequency, as we do. We all have our individual frequencies and vibration. And those frequencies and vibrations in terms of plants, of course, are affected seasonally. So when we talk about harvesting a particular plant, whether it's a chamomile or it's hawthorn berries or whatever it might be, we take or do that harvesting at a particular time. Why? Because the vibration or the frequency is at its most vibrant, and therefore it's going to have the biggest effect on the body of that person who takes it, and the interactivity of the pharmacokinetics. The vibration not only works on the physical, but also works on the emotional and the spiritual issues as well. I personally do a lot of work with orchid essences, and these essences are phenomenal in terms of working with the spiritual as well as the emotional. Within the human body, every cell vibrates on its own frequency, but in harmony with the whole. So that means that the cells, the skin cells, have their own frequency. The gut cells have their own frequency. The liver has a frequency, but they're working as in harmony, and they're working as a symphony. The mean symphony within the human body is 5.4 amps. Don't ask me how that was measured or found, but in my research, that's what I came up with. And health imbalances interfere with this frequency and flow. And that's really what we're looking at when we're looking at dis-ease and the manifestation of disease. We're looking at the imbalance in the frequency and flow of the vibration within this particular human being. So, what parts of the plant do we use? When we talk about pharmacology, we actually use all parts of the plants. Not all plants do we use all parts. So, for example, the dandelion, which you see in the first picture there, we use all parts. So we're using the root, we're using the flowers, we're using the leaves. And each of those parts of that plant are actually working on the digestive system, but they're also, some parts are more bitter than another. So if you wanted to have a bitter, you would take the leaf as opposed to the root, for example. Ginger, we use the roots, and there are many herbs and spices where we use the root, and we use it dried, we use it squeezed, we chop it up and put it into cooking. However, it can be used in all ways, or eaten just as it is, actually. We also, in pharmacology, we also use the aerial parts. And there you see the image of the nettle, which is extremely vibrant in the spring, where it's main function is as a diuretic. So it helps us to boost the lymphatic system to get rid of the winter sluggishness, the overeating, the maybe lack of exercise. It helps us to clear the systems ready for the spring. And as with most herbs, it's also highly, highly nutritive, particularly iron A and C. And then, of course, we also use berries and seeds. And we see there in the last image, this is the hawthorn berry, which we use particularly or has a beautiful affinity to the cardiovascular system, and is very powerful in working with the venous and the arterial system to rebalance hyper and hypo tension. So not all plants do we use all parts, but we do use the different parts of the different plants, if you understand what I'm saying. So plants vibrate on frequency of light and color, and that's how we see them. And they happen to vibrate on the frequency of infrared through to ultraviolet. And the plants themselves tend to arrive in the season, whichever country we live in, when they are needed most. So, for example, I gave the nettle just a couple of minutes ago as arriving in the spring when it's most vibrant. We need it then to clear out everything. The dandelion, similarly, for a liver detox, it has the affinity to the liver, to the digestive system, and it helps us move forward and keep our vibration and frequency balanced. We see the colors because of the electromagnetic spectrum, which the human eye is sensitive to on this frequency infrared to ultraviolet. And this system, together with the plants, just actually happens, which I don't believe anything just happens in nature. It corresponds to the chakra system, which we find in Ayurvedic and traditional Chinese medicine, and I'm sure other medicine forms as well. Looking at the chakra system, it's the spinning wheels of energy that move up through the body, or they stay in place. So, for example, red is the root chakra, the first chakra, the base chakra, sometimes known, going up through orange, through yellow, green, blue, violet, and then ultraviolet, which is the seventh chakra, which is actually above the body, with the main connection through to the universal energy, the universal vibration. And this chakra system and the plants, I believe it's no coincidence that the plants treat the areas of the color that they are. So I mentioned a dandelion for the liver. So we see the liver falls in that place in the body, more or less, together with part of the intestines. The root chakra, red clover, particularly good for reproductive system. Green, of course, is the color of the heart, and all plants are green at some time. And the love that plants give out, you can feel the love that they give out to feed the heart chakra, and so on. So I don't think that this is any coincidence that we have this relationship between the colors of the plants when they arrive and the area of the body or part of the body that they work with or have an affinity to. So what about plant actions? So most herbs, and when I say herbs, I'm also bringing in spices. Most herbs and spices have more than one function. It's very seldom that you have a herb that has only one function. They might have a primary function, but they'll also have supportive functions. So when we look, for example, at ginkgo, ginkgo has affinity to the brain. It's anti-inflammatory. It's a circulatory stimulant, so obviously it's going to be working with the nervous system. It's neuroprotective, it's an antidepressant. So it has more than one function. Similarly, with chamomile, which is a digestive herb, but it's also a sedative, antihistamine, and an anti-inflammatory, and several other functions. So the herbs, when we choose the herbs or spices that we're going to work with, we're looking at the primary system that we want to target in terms of the manifestation of that particular condition. And what other functions can we bring in, or is this herb bringing in to help this body come back to the natural homeostatic balance of well-being and vitality? So, as I mentioned, all herbs and spices have an affinity to particular parts of the body. And very often, as in the doctrine of signatures, they are shaped like that organ. Not always, but you can usually tell by the leaf shape or the flower shape where they might be working. For example, ginkgo for the brain, cleavers for the lymphatic system. I mean, it looks like a lymphatic system, the whole thing. Eye bright, the little tiny blue flower that's brightening your eyes and is anti-inflammatory, antiseptic, antimicrobial. Um, and herbs also work systematically on multiple issues in the body. So they're not working on one part of the body. They're looking at that part, but they're also understanding, they also have the intelligence through this vibration to see where they need to also restore that homeostatic balance. Okay, so active constituents of plants, whole plant medicine. Of course, there are a lot of constituents, and I've just picked the main ones. And certainly the first one, Dr. Chiola touched on yesterday, of course, with the essential oils. And it tends to be, certainly in Western medicine, more the Mediterranean type herbs that produce these beautiful essential oils and also citrus. So the volatile and essential oils we might use, for example, in a base cream to put on topically. In the pharmaceutical world, they'll use it, and the cosmetic, excuse me, the cosmetic world, they use these volatile oils to put into creams to put on the face to make it smell nice, rather than for the actual action, which can be relaxing, stimulating, again, as Dr. Chiola talked about yesterday. So the flavonoid group, this is a massive group of natural substances in the plants with different structures. And these are considered within the nutraceutical, pharmaceutical, medicinal, and cosmetic applications as being an indispensable component in any product that is produced, and therefore are very interested in studying these further or taking them out and putting them into these products. Personally, I'm not sure how effective they are when they come out of the whole plant. It's a bit like taking, I don't know, the liver out of a human and expecting the rest of the human to function without the liver. I find it an interesting concept, and I haven't done enough research to understand really how effective is it when you remove one constituent and put it over here. Does it really work as effectively as the whole plant? So here we have, for the flavonoids, we have the antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, anti-carcinogenic, mutagenic properties. I can't stand here and claim that plants are anti-carcinogenic. I can't do that because I'm not qualified to do that. But we do know through research that some of the plants are now being considered as having these properties, and you've got some examples there again of the Mediterranean herbs: parsley, oregano, thyme, mint. Tannins are a class of astringents within the plants that help to precipitate proteins and make those proteins more bioavailable to the body. And there we have examples of Achillea, hibiscus, nigella, which is black cumin seed, glycyrrhiza, which is a licorice. We also have plants that have resins. These tend to come from trees rather than smaller plants, bushes. They tend to come from trees where the resin is tapped from the bark or just below the bark. It doesn't kill the plant at all. And they are generally sticky, viscous type of substances and particularly good for healing wounds. And therefore they have strong antimicrobial effects. And once that tree has been tapped, it heals itself against this injury because of its resin content. Examples of this, we have Boswellia, Commiphora, and Juniper. We could also put comfrey into that group because comfrey, in the traditional sense, is known as knit bone. It knits the bone. So if you're out, I don't know, hiking somewhere and you happen to have a terrible accident and fall, you can use comfrey to actually try to set the bone if you can get it straightened, of course. We also have saponins, which is also a very big group within the herb world. And the studies really are looking at the immune system related to the saponins, helping us protect the whole body, helping us to keep the immune active and functioning in the way that it needs to function to work against changing viruses, bacteria, stress, pollution, all the things that modern man faces these days. It also, because of that, helps to work against more chronic diseases such as cancers, lowering cholesterol levels. If you believe in cholesterol in the way that it's been taught, I'm not sure I do anymore, but nevertheless, that's where we're at. We might look at soapwort for this. Dioscorea and Panax ginseng have good quantities of saponins as examples. Then we have the polyphenols. Well, polyphenols are in fruit and vegetables of all colors. The more colors, the more polyphenols. And of course, in tea. This is a huge group which includes the flavonoids, the flavanols, and the flavones. And really, there's more in grains, in berries, in fruits, vegetables, than actual leafy type herbs. And of course, the still beans, which we find in grapes, such as resveratrol, and berries. Hence the reason why the blueberries have got this title of superfood. Then we have the bitters. Bitters really speak for themselves. These are about helping us to keep our digestion fit and healthy as we age. And the constituents of volatile oils, phenolics, alkaloids, or sesquiterpenes give this bitter taste action to the herb by promoting digestion before we actually eat, which is why most aperitifs are made of bitter plants or from bitter plants: Campari, Aperol, Vermouth, etc. And in this world, we have the beautiful gentian, artichoke, of course, chamomile, and burdock. Okay, so therapeutic effects on humans. So the key points about the therapeutic effects on humans is that we have this shared biology, this shared frequency and vibrations, which are very similar. And that means that the affinity to the whole of the human being and actually to animals respond fantastically to herbal products. Absolutely amazing. Um, so consequently, because of this relationship, this shared biology, plant structures are working on the human cellular level, which is the place where it really needs to be in order to bring about this change in well-being. We have thousands of years of history. And Martina mentioned also the Greek tradition, the Unani tradition of herbs going back thousands of years together with traditional Chinese medicine, of course, Ayurveda in India. And of course, all the African nations, they also work with medicinal plants, fondly known as witch doctors, but their knowledge is deep with the earth. The pharmaceutical applications. So pharmaceuticals have recognized that plant compounds are really important for the development of pharmaceutical products. And I mentioned earlier that they are very keen to take out the active constituent. I'm not sure that only one constituent is active, as I mentioned, and therefore, how effective is it when you take, for example, curcuminoid out of curcumin and put it into some pharmaceutical drug. However, having said that, we do have digoxin, which comes from foxgloves. We also have aspirin, which comes from willow, and they work fairly effectively as a pharmaceutical application. Herbs generally are safe. Now, this is can be also a bit of a misunderstanding because people think, well, it's natural, so it must be safe. Yes, that goes a long way. However, if you're on medication, you need to be very careful with what herbs you're going to take because herbs can work in two ways. They can increase the application of that pharmaceutical herb or the density of that herb and how it's working, or they can work in reverse and stop it working at all. So it needs to be managed through a professional. Similarly, with things like pregnancy, breastfeeding, we need to be very careful with the safety, but in general, they are safe. And then, of course, we have the prophylactic actions of the therapeutic effects of plants. Unlike pharmaceutical products, we can use the herbs and spices as prophylactics. We don't have to wait until we're sick. We can eat dandelion leaf or drink dandelion tea or nettle tea as a prophylactic to make sure our digestion stays healthy as we age. We can take reishi mushroom as we age beautifully as a prophylactic action. It doesn't have to be because we're sick. And this is something very different to pharmaceuticals, in that pharmaceuticals are looking to fix something. Herbal application in terms of well-being is not only about fixing, it's about maintaining, it's about sustaining that beautiful homeostatic balance of mind, body, and soul. So a closing note here. Plants are they're the medicine of peacetime, and they nurture and cool our souls and spirits. It's very strange that in the last couple of years we are at war with different diseases. We're at war with cancer. Let's beat cancer. Let's beat the COVID virus. Let's beat diabetes. We don't need to be at war with any of these conditions. These conditions, when treated holistically through plant medicine, through naturopathy, through lifestyle changes, No war is required, and plants don't go to war. They just gently work in the background, whether you're walking in nature or you're imbibing or you're applying topically. Um, for me, plants are very much the guiding light of how we can live. They live symbiotically, side by side, and they don't argue with each other. They just find their place and they just excel in where they sit. Um, and nature as a whole has that beautiful, vital, healing energy, that healing force that helps us find our inner balance. And that, perhaps from a naturopathic point of view, is something that I recommend probably to every single client. How often do you go outside and walk in nature? Do you walk in the forest? Do you prefer to walk by the sea? Do you work in the fields? What's going on? Because nature just naturally helps us to heal and to have that inner balance. So, on that note, I would like to say thank you very much for listening and again for giving me this wonderful opportunity. And I'm glad to answer any questions.